right, we're gonna go ahead and get started, and hopefully some other people will join shortly. So just for anyone who's new to our meetings, this is STEM Journal Club. I know we advertise this to a lot of different other clubs, so welcome. And today joining us is Dr. Nacoste. So Dr. Rupert W. Nacoste is an alumni, distinguished undergraduate professor of psychology at North Carolina State University. He has been on the faculty since 1988, where he teaches courses in social psychology. In addition to many teaching awards, he was campus winner of the 2013 UNC Board of Governors Teaching Excellence Award. Dr. Nacoste is a scholar activist of interpersonal and intergroup relationships. His book includes Taking on Diversity, How We Can Move from Anxiety to Respect, and his newest, To Live Woke, Thoughts to Carry in Our Struggle to Save the Soul of America. And this talk title is Welcome to the Age of Neodiversity.
Good evening. Welcome to the Age of Neodiversity. I am a social psychologist. I study social interaction. I start with people live in situations, not in our heads, not in our hearts. People live in situations, and situations change. For example, being a university student is a situation. Even that situation, however, can change in the blink of an eye, as it has happened to us just recently. Sudden and unusual COVID-19 situation. Suddenly, we are all socially disconnected, remote online classes, lack of contact and interaction with professors, lack of contact and interaction with classmates, disappointment because you are still at home. People feel our distraction, lack of focus. People live in situations, and situational change can change patterns of social interaction. Situations change and people try to adjust the way they interact to fit the new situation, but don't always do so very well. Take America. America just ain't what it used to be. We now live in an age of neodiversity. What is neodiversity? This is the new to America interpersonal situation in which we all have to encounter and interact with people not like us on some group dimension. And that neodiversity situation means we all must sometimes interact with persons who do not look like, sound like, believe like, or love like us. I have written 3 books on this topic. Why do I say it's new? Neodiversity is new to America. I grew up in the Jim Crow South. I grew up at a time when I did not go to school with white kids of my own age because it was against the law. I grew up in a time when those signs were everywhere. I saw those when I was a child. And don't misunderstand and don't let people mislead you. The university is new to America, but North Carolina was a bigger part of the Jim Crow South as any other Southern state. When I was serving my country, the United States of America, I drove my first time into North Carolina and hit Smithfield and ran into this sign, "Welcome to Klan Country." But we got rid of those unjust, immoral, and un-American laws and customs. So, welcome to the age of neodiversity. The future is not coming. The future is here and now. I have written 3 books, as I say, on this topic of neodiversity. Why? Because I know America is struggling. Turns out, you see, not knowing how to have respectful social interactions with a person not like me is what is tearing at the soul of America. My first book on neodiversity is called Howl of the Wolf. I wrote it for the North Carolina State University campus. One of my teaching innovations for the course I teach, interpersonal relationships and race, is to have students recall an intense interpersonal intergroup interaction that they have had, and to then report and analyze that interaction story. So in all of my books on neurodiversity, with my students' permission, I use their stories to illustrate the new interpersonal tensions that have been brought into our lives by unavoidable neurodiversity. I do this because personal stories are a way for people to get inside an experience to learn a concept. I wrote and self-published Howl of the Wolf to give it away free to North Carolina State University students. And I have given away about 6,000 copies. My course, Interpersonal Relationships and Race, draws a true neurodiverse mix of students. And as I say, I use their stories in my book. So in Howl of the Wolf, one of the stories I use comes from a student in that course. In chapter 2, No Innocent. Here's the story, the What's Up Homie story. I write this. When it comes to racial matters in America, there are no innocent. I tell this truth because I know you came to NC State with certain hopes and expectations. Everyone does as they move into a new situation, a new phase of life, especially when coming out of high school. You looked forward to the new situation. You hoped, you imagined how well it would go. You imagined what your new freedoms would feel like, would look like. But then the reality of things you had not imagined came, the realities of the actual features of the situation in which you had put yourself. 35,000 students walking and talking to the campus of North Carolina, through the campus of North Carolina State University is part of that reality, usually. 35,000. Among those 35,000, there are yellow, white, black, brown students. There are Christian, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, Hindu, Buddhist students. Hey, no problem. I'm not prejudiced. I can interact with anybody. And then you find yourself in one of those new, exciting situations, and you want it to be liked. You want it to be cool. Here's what happened to one member of the Wolf Pack who admitted this. She writes, whenever I meet someone new of a different race or just slightly different than me, I freak out. I say something at an interpersonal level in which I am not participating in with this person. I think the best example I have of that is when I was meeting friends of friends at a sporting event. Already nervous from hoping they thought I was cool, I was introduced to one of the guys and said, "What's up, homie?" Wait, what? Let me explain. I'm a white girl with blonde hair, and the person I just referred to as homie was a 6-foot muscular built black boy. Homie? I'm sitting here shaking my head right now, just thinking about it. Thankfully, he didn't act very offended. He probably just thought I was trying too hard. When it comes to racial matters in America, there are no innocent. Here is our storyteller. So imagine that moment. What's up, homie? Holy shit. After Howl of the Wolf, and a few years of teaching my interpersonal relationships and race course and collecting more student stories, in 2015 for a national audience, I published my next book on neurodiversity, Taking on Diversity, How We Can Move from Anxiety to Respect. In all my books, in all my teaching, my students will tell you that one of the things I walk people through is the difference between prejudice, bigotry, and racism. Because prejudice is not bigotry, is not racism. There's a lot of confusion about that in America. Prejudice occurs within an individual as anti-group feelings. Bigotry is the behavioral, verbal or nonverbal expression of a group prejudice by an individual. The funny thing is, individuals don't have to show their prejudice. But when they do show it in this verbal or nonverbal way, that's bigotry. Well, wait, what about racism? Well, racism is institutional and organizational support for an individual's prejudice and bigotry. People are very confused about that. Racism is never in a person. When an individual uses a racial slur, people cry out racist. And I want to cry out, it's bigotry. So in my books, I make that distinction very clear. Prejudice is not bigotry, is not racism. And in taking on diversity, again, I use stories. Lots of stories about neurodiversity reported by my students. Stories of bigotry. Stories like, these are stories written by my students, stories like a friend reveals something new and the friend he's interacting with says, wait, what? So you're saying you're gay? Oh God. An ice cream parlor incident written by a student who grew up in Cary, an East Indian student. Hears a white grandmother say in an ice cream shop, let's get out of here before that pocky blows the place up. Or a new boyfriend says to his girlfriend, go do what a woman is supposed to do and make me something to eat. All of those are forms of bigotry, anti-group prejudice that comes out in verbal behavior. So I walk people through this in my books. Students were continuing to gather to be in my class, my interpersonal relationships and race course. The funny thing happened. Usually the course was 40 to 55 students. Then over the summer of 2018, I decided to check the enrollment. I don't teach in the summer. I decided to check the enrollment somewhere mid-July. And I opened it up and saw, oh my God, I have 80 students. My enrollment exploded in 2018. Wonder what was going on in America that was making people want to understand interpersonal relationships and race. Something about a president who used anti-group language. After writing, taking on diversity and publishing it, my final book so far, To Live Woke, Thoughts to Carry in Our Struggle to Save the Soul of America. Once again, for that book, I'm using stories from my students. And I have taught here at North Carolina State for 31 years. And I have taught my interpersonal relationships and race course, which I created, for the last 15 years. So I have taught a mix of students across time and the situation of courses. Again, To Live Woke is like my other books. It's about the neurodiversity situation of America. That neurodiversity situation that requires that we sometimes interact with people who do not look like, sound like, or believe like us can cause people to experience neurodiversity anxiety, and anxiety about how to interact with somebody not like me. Spring 2019, my enrollment continued to be really large. Again, another 80 students. Why are people concerned? Why are students concerned? Well, neurodiversity presents us all with the challenge to have interactions with people not like us and respond to those person's stories with interpersonal respect. In neurodiversity situations, however, too often people respond through neurodiversity anxiety that causes the interaction to go bad. My example from To Live Woke is chapter 40, American Eclipse, which reads this way. I don't teach in the summers. Sometimes I write. Summer 2017, I was a lazy bum. I spent the summer reading for fun. Novels, literary fiction, young adult fiction, with one or two nonfiction books mixed in. One of the nonfiction books was David Barron's American Eclipse, which really hit me because, in an interesting social context, the story told showed how tethered we are to multiple intergroup histories. Neodiversity, you see, is not an ahistorical idea. I could not have come to the idea of describing our current social psychological environment as neodiverse without understanding the intergroup history of America. Each intergroup historical period has had its own level of social psychological darkness, foreboding and dark ways in which people were socialized to think of each other as only members of groups, us versus them. Summer 2017, as we were coming to an actual eclipse, I was reminded of the intergroup histories of our nation and the dark social psychological remnants of each period. No part of our history is untouched by the one-time American enslavement of African peoples. That thought flashed into my mind as I began to read American Eclipse. I picked up American Eclipse from my summer book stack to break away for a little while from my summer reading of fiction. A nonfiction book, American Eclipse is about early American astronomers and their attempt to observe and measure the total eclipse of the sun in 1898. Within 2 pages of reading, in setting the context of the lives of these astronomers at that time, the author talks about the Civil War ending and that end motivating scientists to get to work. That's when I had that first flash thought. Nothing in the psychology of American enterprise is uninfluenced by the one-time enslavement of African peoples. To see, observe, and measure the effects of the eclipse of 1898 meant heading to the then still somewhat untamed American West. At that time, at that place and time, people yet remember George Armstrong Custer's attempt to eradicate American Indians. People still talked about Indian savages. No part of our history is untouched by the unfair, genocidal treatment of American Indians. Yep, that flashed through my mind as I read. I went on, learning the history of American astronomy, enjoying the writing, enjoying the well-written story that includes the inventor Thomas Edison, among other inventors and scientists interested in the eclipse. Those scientists included a name I didn't know because this person was a woman scientist, Maria Mitchell. Another flash. Nothing in the psychology of the American enterprise is uninfluenced by the too long resistance to acknowledging the powerful intellect of women. Let me just say this. If you are at all interested in early American scientific endeavors of astronomy and a bit about early meteorology, American Eclipse is a fun 5-star read. In it, you get real glimpses into the actual lives and motivations of a bunch of eclipse-obsessed scientists, their technological challenges and human adventures leading up to their chance to see and measure the 1898 total eclipse that could be observed from America. You see, this book, American Eclipse, is not about any of my flashes, not the enslavement of Africans, not the stealing of land and life of American Indians, not demeaning views of women. It's just that those are part of the intergroup context of America, even in a book about early American astronomy. In Barron's well-researched book, American Eclipse, there are statements people made in 1898 that are the same cringe-worthy statements some people make today about Blacks, American Indians, and women. That is why it is more than fair to say that nothing in the psychology of our 21st century is uninfluenced by our histories of intergroup bigotries. Yet know this too, nothing in our American psychology has been so profound and important as those marginalized and discounted peoples pushing through and defeating America's too many intergroup bigotries. That is why, in the 21st century, we arrive at a neo-diverse social environment, this time and circumstance where people from many different groups are free to walk around and be engaged in the American promise of the pursuit of happiness. But given our intergroup histories and our associated long psychological struggle with multiple intergroup histories, today there are Americans who find it a hardship to have to encounter and interact with people from so many different groups by way of race, yes, but also sexual orientation, religion, bodily condition, sex of person, mental health condition, gender identity, age, and on and on. Indeed, recent survey research is clear in showing that lots of Americans are experiencing interpersonal anxiety about this neodiversity. My knowledge of that research has been the reason that in my activist teaching and writing, I have been calling out to Americans to say, welcome to the future. The future is not coming. It is here and now. I've been making this proclamation loudly because not understanding that is causing a lot of confusion in America. All of the intergroup tensions we are witnessing in America today or because for too long in this country, to organize our daily social interactions, we have relied on false categories: race, sex of person, religion, and sexual orientation. We have relied too much on those false categories for getting through our daily walk through life. Oh, don't misunderstand me. There are ways in which these are real characteristics of persons. Look at any photo of me, and you will see that I am indeed a big, giant, dark-skinned black man. Yet, that information becomes a false category when people try to use that information, that category, to make judgments to guide the way they interact with me. For too long in America, we have relied on false categories that made us versus them distinctions. We have used us versus them ways of thinking about people to do what? To keep them in their place. Try to keep the world simple. Now, today, in the future we are living in, we are seeing that those categories don't work. Those categories are false. It is false, you see, to believe that women aren't smart enough to be engineers, physicists, and mathematicians. It is false, you see, to believe that all Muslims are terrorists. It is false, you see, to believe that gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender persons have no place at North Carolina State University, where I'm a professor, and where we have created and staffed our gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender student center. In the future we are already living, those false categories don't work. Resistance to accepting that social reality is ripping through our whole nation, making too many Americans anxious, tense, and sometimes angry. A white nationalist rally in Charlottesville is only one example of that irrational, dangerous anger, not to mention an insurrection at the Capitol. Just witness all the irrational calls to the police because a Black person is eating lunch, having a picnic in a park, walking into the neighborhood swimming pool. Why does the truth do this to people? Well, since as children, too many people were taught to rely on false categories of us versus them, false categories that now don't work, people struggle, people wrestle mightily with the question, who are among the we and who among the they? Our too long history of relying on false categories is now tearing at the soul of America. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the soul of America. We soil and wound that soul when we try to rely on false categories. With today's neodiversity, we must find ways to stop ourselves from using our historical reliance on false categories, false cognitive intergroup categories. We must work out this struggle because no matter what, neodiversity is the social psychological reality we are living in and must find productive ways to manage in our interpersonal lives. Our neodiversity future is not coming. It is here and now. That is why I have taken it upon myself to write 2 books for our national American audience. And because of those 2 books, I have become a herald of neodiversity. I was, before the pandemic, traveling across this country, being called to help people deal with, understand neodiversity, and help their students on various campuses begin to process neodiversity in a more productive way. One of the places I went was Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania, October 2018. I have become a herald of neodiversity. Shippensburg, I was there to give a campus-wide lecture. These are my hosts from the provost office. The end of the day, I was giving a lecture called Getting Along at the Table of a Neodiverse Campus. While I was sitting in the provost office, I saw a shadow move by the door, and I thought, wait, who is that? Because it was a really big shadow. So I got up and looked down the hall, and there was this mascot. Look, I was doing a lot of traveling. So I never know who I'm going to meet and interact with on these trips. So I thought I'd take a picture with the Shippensburg mascot, Big Red, so I could show it to my students. They went, where have you gone this time, Dr. Akos? Well, I thought I'd show them this. Just goofiness. But what did I do aside from a campus-wide lecture at the end of the day? Well, it turns out professors at Shippensburg University wanted me to talk to their classes of first-year students. So I talked to 4 classes of first-year college students at Shippensburg University, and I talked to them about neodiversity. I talked to them about how we have to work on how we interact with people who are not like us. So I was in 4 classes. This is just one of them. And because of what I was talking about, I realized, given these were young people, they needed some tips. So I started talking about tips that would help them interact well, interact productively on their own neodiverse campus. That ends up in my book, To Live Woke, as chapter 44. What happened was, particularly this first class, I started writing on a board, which I hadn't done in God knows how many years since I used PowerPoint for everything. So I was writing on the blackboard, and one of my hosts took a picture of what I wrote on the board. So I came up with 5 tips through conversation with these young people. 5 tips to help you interact well on a neodiverse campus, really in neodiverse America. Tip 1 is what I always start with. Never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. I say again, never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group, because as soon as you do that, you're going to screw up the interaction. It's a funny thing that people don't think about. They want to rely on a stereotype. That's interacting with a person as a representative of a group. But what they don't think through is that members of stereotype groups know the stereotype of their group. So as soon as you use the stereotype, the person that's looking at you like, really? Consider me. I am a big, giant, dark-skinned Black man. And what do people do with me as a representative of that group? They say, hey, so what's your favorite sport? I care nothing about sports. I've never played sports. I could give a shit. So where's that interaction gonna go? Yeah, you see the problem. No, people do it all the time. Yeah, what about that game? What game? Really? And then they're looking at me like I said something wrong. No, this is your problem, not mine. Never try to interact with a person as a representative of a group. The Shippensburg students agreed with me that this was the most basic starting point, because it means don't rely on stereotypes. That's tip 1. Tip 2, go slow. The problem with anxiety when it comes to social interaction. Remember, I've said neodiversity is a situation, but that situation of interacting with people not like you can cause you to feel anxiety about how to interact. And that makes people speed up. The tip is go slow. Check yourself, because you're about to blurt something out. When I let those Shippensburg students know that my approach to all that is going on is at the interpersonal level, I informed them that one of the discoveries from social psychology is this, that when it comes to social interactions, self-disclosures in social interaction should come slowly, as if peeling an onion. And I always add to that, self-disclosure should be asked for slowly, as if peeling an onion. Those two together add up to the go slow rule. People try to rush because of their anxiety to get to know you. They try to rush using a stereotype. Go slow to cope with the neodiversity anxiety, because if you don't, you're gonna make a mistake. Kind of mistake? Tip 3, live with the anxiety. Live with the anxiety. Too often we try to get past our anxiety, and that's when we, as they said, make it worse. Make it worse. There's so many examples of this, but the classic for me right now is this. You blurt out a reaction that what you did was, you blurt out a reaction to the person because you don't know their group membership. My mixed race students talk to me about this all the time. That they're trying to interact with somebody, they think it's going well, but the person seems anxious, and then suddenly the person just blurts out, so what are you? What do you mean, what are you? Human. No human being should ever be asked, what are you? It raises the interesting question, why do you have so much anxiety about knowing the person's group membership? What is it you're trying to avoid? Is it that you are used to saying things about certain groups that you are now want to be careful about? Live with the anxiety. Instead of rushing and blurting something out, it's better to acknowledge to yourself that you're feeling anxious. And then remind yourself to follow rule 2, go slow. So live with the anxiety, go slow. Live with that anxiety for a while. Tip 4, agree to disagree. Meeting new people means encountering people with different approaches to living life in the social world. For example, different political views. Here's the thing, other people have their own social histories and experiences, just like you do. From their experiences, those other people have already come to some of their own opinions, just as you have. So agree to disagree without being competitive, without feeling threatened, without attacking the other person. Look, what I'm talking about is meeting new people. If you don't have a relationship with someone, you are not in a position to start arguing with them about what they believe. You're not going to change people, so what's the point of that? If you don't have a relationship with someone, or you're not going to have a relationship with someone, agree to disagree and then move to your next interaction. This is one of the things that's tearing Americans up right now. Everybody has to agree with me right now. No, they don't. And I don't have to interact with you. As soon as you start doing that to me, I look at you and go, okay, see you. People forget that anybody can do that. Agree to disagree without being competitive, without feeling threatened, without attacking the other person. In other words, expect to encounter disagreements. It is the concept I teach in my social psych course, the theory of mind. It's a really interesting concept, but it's a very simple concept. The idea is that if you have a mature theory of mind, you understand that other people have thoughts, feelings, and preferences too, just like you do. Agree to disagree. If people won't respect you, by the way, once you've made clear what your position is, and they try to do this to you, that is convince you, walk the hell away. Move on. Tip 5 summarizes, pulls all the others together. Have learning conversations. Have learning conversations. Learning conversations. Since on the campus and in life, you'll be meeting a mix of new people. Make your conversations learning conversations. How do you do that? A, avoid relying on stereotypes and stereotype questions. You go to mixers and people want to go immediately to, what is your academic standing? What's your major? Okay. What do people want to talk about that? What do people want you to talk about other things? It's one of those things that happens to me in another way. People find out I'm a professor. Oh, shit. Now all they want to ask me about it, and it's worse because I'm a professor of what? Psychology. Oh, now people want to talk to me about being a psychologist and what do you think about reading people's mind? Oh, shut up. I want to talk about books, novels. I want to talk about movies, music. Let's interact. We can get to that other stuff eventually if it's necessary. Avoid relying on stereotypes and stereotype questions. So People ask, what do you do for a living? That's a stereotyped question because it narrows the interaction. Try something different, like what keeps you busy? What keeps you busy? Trust me, every time I've done this, the person I've been interacting with, their eyes have lit up just a little bit because they realize, oh, you actually want to talk to me. What keeps you busy? How do you spend your days? So avoid relying on stereotypes and stereotype questions. Go slow. Interact with the intent to learn what the other person is willing to tell you. Live in the moment. Live with the anxiety. Agree to disagree. No one is going to change anybody in the moment. So learn how people think without trying to change how they think or what they think. Those are the 5 tips I came up with at Shippensburg University for these students. Again, they're in my book, To Live Woke. Our university has decided to quote me and put up flyers with my statements from my fall 2017 convocation speech. And it is one of the things they've been posting around and sending around is learn to interact with people who are different from you. It makes you a better human being. And it does. Remember, neodiversity is not about who. Neodiversity is a what. Neodiversity is the interpersonal situation we all live and work in which we have to encounter and sometimes interact with people from many different groups. So keep in mind that neodiversity can cause interpersonal anxiety, anxiety about who are among the we and who are among the they, anxiety about how to interact with them. You gotta get the them out of your mind, and anxiety that can activate bigotry in anyone's behavior. There are no innocent. There are no innocent. We all have stereotypes. And we have to learn to manage that in a neurodiverse environment. So practice incorporating the 5 tips into all of your everyday social interactions with whomever you might find yourself in interaction with in a social situation. That's what I mean when I say live woke. Thank you. Azaria.
Hi, Dr. Nacoste. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Ah, Jawa.
Yeah, I called her in here. I called her and I was like, guess where I'm at?
We miss you, Dr. Nacoste.
Hello.
Like, so much. I'm happy to see you.
I know. We're so excited to see you.
I'm sorry, Rabia. And my students are in here. So anyway, thank you. Questions? Or however you want to handle this, Rabia.
So if anyone has any questions or comments they want to make, go ahead now. I have some questions of my own, but I'll let someone else go first.
Now let's start with you.
Putting me on the spot.
You're the organizer, so okay. Well, okay, if anybody else wants to go first, I don't care.
I was gonna talk about so there was, I don't know if some of you guys remember the physics professor who got suspended a year ago, but I was actually in that physics class.
Oh.
Yeah, so that was my session. So I saw the whole thing go down, but I don't know, I just wanted to have that conversation. I think from his perspective, maybe he was really joking, but in that kind of setting, it's just not appropriate.
Bingo, there we go.
Okay.
Read the situation. And those are not jokes. Yes. You can't talk about a whole group of people as being worthless as a joke.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, that's demeaning to a whole group of people. That's the problem with these false categories I was just talking about. That was in him. That was something he'd been carrying around for a while and using, except he now used it in a very public forum that was really inappropriate. But any use of it was inappropriate.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to get another perspective on it because I was just reading some of the articles and his response was, well, obviously I'm joking, but I just think that in general, I think some STEM professors are kind of maybe not even consciously, they don't really focus on women in STEM as much, or like the females in their classes, they'll just kind of talk directly to men, or even during office hours or smaller sessions. And I think like saying stuff like that can make like female students less likely to go to office hours or get help from those professors, because it's like, well, you obviously don't even care about me as a student or think that like I'm a worthy student. So saying something like that can just make it 10 times worse on, because I remember like just in general when I take like physics and chemistry courses, I get kind of nervous to go to office hours and stuff. So like hearing stuff like that makes me like less likely to go anyways.
So let's talk about this in some of the concepts I just talked about. Prejudice is not bigotry, it's not racism. What we're talking about is people carrying around anti-group feelings, or at least feelings of ambiguity or ambivalence about a group of people, women. When that comes out in behavior, that's bigotry, and that's what happened in the classroom. One of the things that's really interesting, however, is the idea that they are STEM professors who don't really pay attention to women. That would mean something. That would mean a couple of things. It would mean, one, they're not paying attention to social change in our country. And two, it would mean that our university is not pushing them to pay attention.
Right.
So that's the racism, genderism, sexism part. Because the institution, by being passive about this, is actually supporting their prejudice and bigotry towards women. And you're right. The effect of that is the effect on women, the negative effect on women. So you are absolutely right.
I think that it's interesting you bring up like NC State as an institution, because like I think that because Myra, she's one of my friends, she's the one who tweeted it, and she has a pretty big platform on Twitter, and other students after she tweeted that came out and said, oh, something similar happened to me. But I think if she didn't have such a big platform on Twitter, that maybe it wouldn't have gotten any attention, and like maybe the university would not have done anything about it, because obviously stuff like that happens. But this one was kind of highlighted because she has a big platform, and it's like public where other people can see it, not just people who can't really do anything about it.
It's really interesting how institutions operate. If they can get away with being passive, they will be passive.
Right.
I know this. I was this university's first vice provost for diversity and African American affairs. And I only lasted 2 years. Why? Because I was raising hell. I was not backing down, and I was saying stuff publicly. I was writing stuff, and they were like, oh, hell no. So you're right about your friend's platform being very important to this. It's the only reason I would know about it. My students started emailing me and saying, have you heard about this, Dr. Nacoste?
Right.
So that's how it began to spread across campus. And I raised a question in the technician column about why the university took so long to do anything about this guy.
Right. Yeah, I think that that was just one of the incidents that I was aware of and actually got to see firsthand, and got to see like all the repercussions that happened after it. So I think that was just, it's very related to everything that you said now. It includes bigotry and racism, but thankfully like action was made.
Yes.
I have a similar, not really similar story, but kind of one that I thought was funny just because it happened to me, and then also heartwarming at the same time. So I was out to lunch with 3 of my friends, and one of them loves to make jokes like all the time. And she's all like, I'm Muslim, she's also Muslim. The other 2 girls we were with are Muslim, but none of them wear hijab besides me. So we were all having lunch, and she loves to make jokes, and she does it to everyone. She'll be like, oh, you dirty Muslim, I can't believe you're Muslim, I can't believe you believe in that, I can't believe you wear a hijab, blah blah blah. And I know. And there were 2 girls next to us, one who was white and one who was Asian, and they like looked at her and started yelling at her. Or like, don't talk to her like that. How could you say something like that? How could you be sitting across from her and talk to her like that? And gave her hell. And it took me like saying, oh, thanks so much, but she's actually Muslim too, and she's kidding, for them to stop. But it was like, I didn't even realize there was anyone around us. But when I heard, like, I was used to, like, I don't know, I was used to her making those jokes because she does them not just to me but to everyone about herself. But when I heard those two girls stop her and say something, I was, because nothing had ever like that had ever happened to me in reality. So hearing them defend me, even though it was a joke, was like amazing.
That is amazing. I like the end of the story, but
I
I'm
knew
very
you were-
disturbed. I'm always disturbed by in-group stuff. So when I teach my course,
Yeah.
students eventually start to ask me, well, wait a minute, does this stuff apply to within the group? And the answer is yes. That is, within the group, you can express, use language, you can engage in behavior that is bigotry against your own group. It is not a joke.
Yeah. And I think that that's what it took for her to learn, like, don't make those jokes, even about yourself or about anyone else.
I talk to African American students about this all the time when it comes to the language of racial slurs.
Mm-hmm.
We can say it. No, you can't. Because you will find yourself in deep waters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's inappropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
I write about that in To Live Woke as well.
Wait, so in your opinion, no one should use any racial slurs?
Well, think about this. Think about what the racial slur is attached to. People say we're going to change the meaning of it. Really? You're going to change the meaning of the N-word. The N-word is attached to a history, a real history. And it's a history of violence, lynching, castration. How do you change that? How do you change it? And the funny thing is, people who have said this out loud, that they can change the meaning of the word, as soon as a white person uses the word, apparently the word still has the same meaning. Aha. So, and it's true also for the way some, I don't know how much this is still going on, but there was a time, I know, that young women used to think it was funny to call each other B's and S's and all of that. It's the same problem. Because here's what you're not realizing, what people are not realizing. They're demeaning their own group. They're doing pinpricks into their own group identity. Sometimes it's defensive, but it's still hurtful. The social psychology of it.
No, I'm with you there. But I was just wondering, because usually a lot of people don't have that opinion. And I don't feel like my opinion really matters. I'd rather learn from people who are more educated about it.
Well, remember, I grew up in the Jim Crow South. So there's certain words that have a real meaning to me.
Right.
And it has a real history, whether it has a meaning to me personally. I mean, I grew up in the Jim Crow South. When somebody slips, and sometimes my students do this without realizing they're doing, they want to talk about people of color, and they say instead colored people. Let me tell you, my back goes up, and I know they made a mistake. I just take a deep breath. Because they didn't really mean that. I just say, you mean people of color. Because colored people mean something completely different. Everything has a history. That's why I read that chapter, American Eclipse. Mm-hmm. The chapter is really about the fact that there are intergroup histories that are part of America that we have to start dealing with and stop trying to pass over.
Yeah, I think that a lot in American history or history in general, people is usually rewritten. Like history is a lot of times tried to be like rewritten into a more like peaceful and like less violent. They try to make everything super vanilla and easy for everyone. So
here's a funny thing. Let me do this. Oh God. So I've been teaching this course, Interpersonal Relationships and Race, now Interdependence and Race. I created the course. It's been 15, 16 years now. And one of the things I realized I needed to have in the course was a real history of race in America. So I have my students read a book called Blood Done Sign My Name by Tim Tyson, which tells the story, begins with a story of a racial murder of a Black man in public in 1972 in Oxford, North Carolina. Yikes. And then he uses that to talk about to walk you through the whole history of race in America in various ways. My students go wild because they say, I never heard any of this. They say, what I was told was this, that there was some stuff going on with segregation. Martin Luther King Jr. gave a speech and everything was all right. That is not your fault. That is the fault of the school system. And we're having that fight still. But it does put you, young people, at a disadvantage. And it makes young people think that they can joke about stuff. One student, more than one student has really said this to me, not my students, but when I travel. People sometimes have to write about what they learned from me and all of that. One student wrote this. He says, I used to think that all the people who lived during segregation, all the Black people who lived during segregation are now dead. Because it was way back. No, it wasn't. No, I'm right here. I'm right here.
wait,
But you see what that does.
They in history books they make the period of like Martin Luther King, they make the pictures black and white instead of colored, even though the pictures were colored originally, just to make it like it was further back in history than it was.
Yep.
Yeah,
so that's something to pay attention to as you move into the bigger world and you become parents, uncles and aunts and all of that stuff. What are the children reading? What are they not learning that's gonna put you at a disadvantage? Think about this. Just think about this. And some of you have had this experience with me. You've been taught a certain way about race in America, and you think you know how it goes, and you think you're ready to come to a campus like ours, which it turns out has a mix of people that is unlike any other place I've ever been. And so now you start to get anxious about how to interact with all these different people. And then it's like, okay, the classroom will be safe. And then this big giant ass Black man walks in as the professor. I've seen students jump back in their seats. I've seen students start to squirm, literally going like this. They're not ready because they've been so poorly taught. Of course, I also have a style that pushes people back, but that's a different issue. Look at this area. But that's part of the dynamic, right? You're used to thinking that Black people are a certain way, and particularly a professor, right? And then, whoo, yeah. You're getting even, some of you are getting a sense of it even by way of Zoom, what it would be like to be in a classroom with me. You're like, this would be something, wouldn't it?
No, being in a classroom with you is like literally the best experience. I remember the first day, everybody was so shook. I could hear like people literally thinking like, should I drop this class? Because they were so intimidated. I sat there and I was like, no, I would never drop his class. Like I was like, he's so interesting. I was like, I want to see where this is going. And me and Azaria talk about you all the time.
Oh
like,
God.
We're always telling students like, you missed out because if you didn't take Dr. Nacoste for both of his classes, especially social psychology, that was really good too. I was like, you missed out.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But you're right, they've missed the exam. Mohammed.
I'm kind of confused. So why would people be jumping back in their seats and like being shook and intimidated and all that on the first day of school? Are you just like one of those teachers that like yells at everybody on their first day?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
See, people say I yell. Okay. I do not yell. I use this voice. So one of the things I do is I recite a poem. I start by reciting a poem. Here's the problem. People have in their head what a professor should be. That's a false category. You say professor and people think something that they're not realizing they're thinking. So take me, for example. They read that the professor is the guy by the name of Nacoste, whose first name is Rupert. Now think about that. Let that sink in. So it's Dr. Rupert Nacoste is the professor, and everybody's saying you should take this course with this guy. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you now.
And you haven't had the experience of me. Just standing next to me, people kind of start to crumble because I really am a giant.
How tall are you? I want to know.
Say again?
How tall are you?
6'3".
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine. That sounds fine. I'm not just
Yeah,
6'3",
like...
I'm 6'3", broad-shouldered, football looking like 270 pounds. Okay.
Well, that's
Yeah.
6'3" gets me because that's a foot taller than I am.
Yeah, see, like, that's what I mean. It's like, wait. I remember one time in Poe Hall, we'd been in the semester maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but for whatever reason, one of the people who was sitting way up top decided to walk down at the end of class. And as he was walking down the stairs to come to the front to speak to me, the closer he got to me, the wider his eyes got. No, really. And by the time he got to the bottom, he said, "You really are a giant." But nothing I can do about that, right? This is me. Yeah. Anyway.
Joa, do you want to ask your question that you did in the chat?
Oh yeah, so I was gonna ask about what do you think about the conversation surrounding whose responsibility it is to educate others on like racism and bigotry and things like that, because this is like an ongoing Twitter conversation.
Oh God. Twitter.
No, but it's a really interesting like kind of like debate, I guess. So it's kind of like some people are saying, like, mostly Black people are saying, some Black people are saying it's not my responsibility to teach a white person what racism looks like or what you should or should not do. Like, because at this point, if you're not educating yourself, like, what more can I do? You know what I'm saying? Like, why is it our responsibility to teach you how to treat us, basically? And it's like an ongoing conversation that I think is like really interesting. And I personally feel like it's everybody's responsibility to kind of, take upon yourself to learn, but also to listen and to teach, if you feel like you're in a space to teach. But I wanted to know what you thought.
Well, it's interesting because it's complicated. So for what I say is I teach in a classroom. I don't teach walking around random people. But this conversation, the way I've been framing it for people, because I've been asked about this a lot, is how to be an ally. And I said, the first thing you have to do to be an ally is self-examination and self-education. Notice that I say self-examination. You have to be true to you have to dig into yourself to say, okay, I do have stereotypes, what are they? You have to dig into yourself to say, what don't I know? What book can I read? What article can I read? What video can I watch that will help me understand this better? You have to do that work yourself. That does not mean people can't help you, but those people have to be people you have a relationship with. Not just people, you walk up to, I had a guy do this in a coffee shop. He had just seen a movie with Black people in it, and I didn't really know this man. And we'd speak to each other, but I didn't know this man. And so one morning he comes in and he sits down and he starts saying, so tell me about, I was like, no. No, I am not here for you as a Black person. That's insulting. So it's complicated, but it starts with the person doing their own work and then having relationships. And then people say, but I don't have any relationships. That's part of the problem. If you look at your social circle and you say, I have no Black people in it, check yourself. Why is that? Because trust me, we are everywhere. How is it that you have created a social circle with no people of color in it, with no women, with no Muslims, with no Indians, with no nothing? How did you do that in this America? And that means it's not unconscious. And trust the psychologist when I say all this talk about unconscious bias is bullshit. People know what they're doing.
I wanted to say, even as a club perspective, like when they're like, you need to have diversity in your club, like I think that people don't realize it comes with work. Like you can't just assume that you'll have diversity in a club. You have to go out and try to get it. And actually actually I don't know if she's a doctor, but Maureen Cullens from Duke University, she came and spoke to us, and she kind of called out our club. And she was like, oh, you're trying to raise awareness about diversity, but where's that diversity in your club? And we were all, for a second trying to get super defensive. But she was right, because we're fully South Asian board, and that wasn't because of any outright racism or bigotry. It was just because we just asked our friends and who wanted to start the club. So we started the club, and our friends are mostly South Asian, so there's the ones who joined. And after talking with her, that's when we realized we need to go out of our way, and we need to reach out to other people for diversity in our guest speakers, not just with race, but with just diversity in what people are teaching, so we can get other people who are interested in other things, and also create board positions and have diversity within our board members, so that we can have diversity in our club. So I think that was a big teaching moment for all of our board members, that it's not you can't just have diversity, you need to go out and try to get it.
Yeah, it's not automatic. So here's an interesting thing. I've been talking to a lot of groups by way of Zoom because of my new book, and people find out about me and have issues they want to try and deal with. Two of the groups I've talked with are groups that raise money for North Carolina State University. And both the groups have this problem. When you look at their strategic plan, the way they talk about getting new members to the board of the foundation, they talk about people who have already been on the board. They talk about friends who've been on the board. I said, you have created a closed circle. You can't find diversity by going at it that way. Likewise, I also think people are, you mentioned earlier, and I'm going to circle back to this, that people don't realize how much work they have to do on their own. So I did a talk for an advancement group on campus, and afterwards they were very excited and all of that. And they asked me if I would come back. And I said, no. They were like, why not? Because what I did was show you the things you needed to work on. So now you need to go work on them and not have me make you feel comfortable just because he's going to come give us another talk. I don't work that way. What are you prepared to do now? Everybody's prepared to listen for a little bit, but that's not the action. I deliver lessons. Now, what are you prepared to do? So no, I'm not coming back. It's getting close to my dinner time, and I have to cook, so.
I have a question. It's not about this.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you share your gumbo recipe?
Oh, have I not done that for your class?
No. And I'm like, is it like a secret? Is he holding out? He doesn't share.
Oh God, I'm in so much trouble. Send me an email and ask me that, and I'll send it to you.
Okay, I'll definitely.
Anybody.
Okay, we want to know too. I'm tired of eating college food.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm a Louisiana Creole. I'm from the Bayou country of Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And Creole means mix of cultures. Mm-hmm. So the Creoles are people like myself who are a mix of Africans, American Indians, Spanish. There's one other that I can't think of right now. But that means the food has all that in it. Mm-hmm. So jambalaya is almost like a paella, that kind of thing. And so the food always has a little spice in it, and it's a mix of things. So I got recipes, and I cook a lot. So,
Me too.
especially now, right? Oh, y'all don't know this. I like telling people this. I've left my house twice since last March.
Oh,
Wait, yeah, right.
How do you
Are
get
you getting
groceries?
your groceries delivered?
I get it delivered. Everything's delivered to me.
Oh my
I'm-
gosh, Dr. Nacoste.
I'm old. I'm in the
I
highest.
know. I know, but like,
are you gonna get back to
Have
me?
you gotten the vaccine yet?
I will get it when the time comes. I'm not going to do it during the semester because I'm teaching and there could be issues.
yeah.
Mhm.
So once the semester's over, I'll go ahead and do it.
Wait, you're
Is
still
So are you like, are you
What?
walking around your house like outside or something? Like, how
Not
are you
really.
not
I'm
going
in the
stir
house.
crazy?
I'm literally in the house.
you
You
open
gotta at
up,
least stay active now.
How?
Yeah, you do
I'm
need to.
old. What do you want me to do?
Physical
I don't know,
activity
walk
is
around the
still
house.
essential. Okay, you have to have 30 minutes every day.
Oh
especially in the
no,
backyard.
Yes.
that's long gone. I
Oh
do
my
stretch
God.
and that kind of stuff, but that's about it.
Maybe get a dog so you have to walk.
Oh no,
He's not leaving the house.
I don't do
Wait,
pets.
so what
So-
class are you teaching now?
Say again.
You're still teaching?
I'm teaching. Yeah, I teach this. You're in my classroom right now. This is where I teach from, right here.
Oh, I thought you meant there's another class you came up with that we haven't, come to. And I was about to say,
What?
Dr. Nacoste, it's my senior year. You can't play with me like that.
What I say? What are you talking about?
No, she thought you meant another
I
class.
thought you were supposed to be, chilling.
No, no,
When are
not
you
yet.
retiring? Is this your last semester? or-
Okay. Y'all are so funny. Let me tell you what happened. I actually was supposed to retire, what is this, last spring.
Yes.
But here's what happened. When the whole thing changed, I had to learn a whole new set of skills about how to teach like this. So once I figured it out, I realized, well, I might as well do it again. It doesn't, yeah.
Wait, so
I mean, it makes sense. You're sitting at home, so it's not even effort like that.
Yeah, no, I just changed shirts.
No offense.
you both sections still?
What was that?
You're still teaching both sections?
No, no, oh, okay, no. I decided I could no longer teach interdependence and race.
Okay.
The reason is that when I teach that course, as these two know, Azaria and Jawa, know that when I get to the section on racial slurs, the lectures are very intense because I use the words out loud. Well, you can't do that on Zoom. You can't have you can't have this big voice saying those words into people's living rooms or wherever you are. You don't know where people are.
Mm.
You don't know who's right next to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't control the environment, so I won't do it. So
Mhm.
now I'm teaching Psych 311 on the interpersonal introduction to social psychology with 300 students.
Mm. Well, how are you? Are you like okay, like socializing? How's your mental like?
Oh, that's good. That's a good question. Yeah, so it helps that I am an introvert, and that means I don't need as much of the social interaction as other people because interaction wears me down.
Mhm.
But it also, I'm a reader, so I have tons of books. I read pretty much every day. I'm writing. I cook, so my days fill up. So I'm pretty good. It's only recently that I've started to feel it a little bit psychologically in terms of the missing real social interaction.
Mhm.
That
And
is
then you
being,
came here to STEM Journal Club.
that's right. This actually helps. I sleep well anyway, but tonight I'll sleep even better. Any kind of interaction helps. And so the teaching actually helps. Even though when I teach, they don't get to say much to me because they're 300 students.
Yeah.
But at least I am thinking about it, doing it, seeing how they're reacting, that kind of stuff. And then I've done a lot of Zoom presentations for small groups. So that all of that has helped me. But I realize, like everybody else, I have to pay attention to my psychological state because this is definitely different.
Mhm.
And it's a strain. So I've had good days. I had mostly good days, but I've had some days that were like, whoo, this doesn't feel good.
So
but I'm hanging in there.
So does the institution like ever reach out to you and ask you about how to diversify the school more? Like,
Look here, here's the thing about me. The institution reaches out to me when they've gotten themselves in real trouble.
right.
Okay? But
Like-
most of the time, literally most of the time, they stay away from me. They're like, no. Because he's gonna tell us something we don't want to hear.
Like, because they still haven't handled that Proud Boy thing. Like they hired.
I know.
It's still,
Oh,
And that's
yeah.
complicated.
it is.
It is. Because the question is, has he done anything on the campus? Has he used campus resources to express those opinions? Otherwise, it's freedom, is First Amendment.
I guess so, but like, isn't him being in that group part of him expressing himself?
Yeah, but they're
So you
all
can
okay. So if you start doing that, you're gonna get rid of a lot of people
Yeah.
Is what
because
it
you
is.
don't know who's connected to who, and what groups matter. So some people are gonna start talking about, what people are gonna do. People are gonna start talking about groups they don't like being around.
Yeah. No,
So that's why it's complicated.
I think like my mom, she's always expressed this point to me, but it's like even if someone says something and like it doesn't connect with you, and even if like that thing can be like harmful, but they still, if you try to get rid of some people's freedom of expression, you're gonna like ultimately get rid of a lot of freedom.
It's very tough. It's very tough. If they do stuff at work, then you got to get rid of them. You definitely have to get rid of him. If he had gone to DC and been shown to have been there, then you get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
But none of that has been, there's no evidence of any of that except his membership. That makes it tough. And I understand the emotion, but that you can't act purely on emotion. When we had an incident when President Obama was first elected, we had students on this campus who wrote in the free expression tunnel, who wrote, "Shoot that in the head." Yeah, see, there you go. Now, the problem was not that they called him an N-word. The problem was that they said, "shoot." See, that's how it goes. So the Secret Service came because that's a threat to the President of the United States. Students on campus wanted those students expelled. Turns out we didn't have the right to do that because the Secret Service investigated, said there was no real threat, and then y'all handled the rest of it. They were suspended, but they were not expelled.
And at the same time, like, obviously I disagree with that statement, but it's called the like free expression tunnel.
That's the problem. See, that's the problem. That place has a history.
Yeah. So.
And there's a couple of ways to think about it. Some people say we need to get rid of it altogether. It shouldn't be that. Okay. Other people say that it is a barometer. It shows us some of the stuff we have to work on campus.
Okay, I have one last question before I think we should wrap up and I'll go eat dinner. But
Okay.
I'm hungry too. But basically, this one, I just have heard so many mixed opinions. Do you think that like statues or monuments should be like torn down? The ones that represent slave owners or like slavery and stuff like that?
Put them in a museum. They should not be on public grounds.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's why. To have it on public grounds shows support for that ideology.
Right.
That's racism.
Mm-hmm.
Put it in a museum. That's fine. Somebody can have it in their yard. I don't care. But to have it at the Capitol, to have it on state grounds, no. No.
Literally, they put it up like during the 60s to like show Black people how they feel.
That's exactly right.
So like it has nothing to do with like, them like in their legacy and all that stuff. No, it's for racism.
No.
So do you also think that like building names that were for like KKK people that were KKK members,
Same
like,
problem.
they should change the names.
Yeah, same problem. Same problem. And they knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Same problem. That's why, for example, the change of Cameron Village,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard about that, is a good move.
What are they changing it to?
Oh, they came up with some village thing,
Oh,
but they got rid of the Cameron because that person was a slave owner. The land was land on which the enslaved worked.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm new to Raleigh. Did not know that one.
but that's how it goes. That is how it goes. That's the whole point of non-education.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Nacoste. It's just like, yes, I needed this again.
So good to see everybody. I'm glad y'all was invited. Thank you, Rabia.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to our club.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Take
thank
care
you,
now.
Dr. Nacoste. We really enjoyed it.
Hey, go outside. Smell
Thank
it.
you for coming.
Yeah, get some vitamin D
That was
or
so
take
funny.
some supplements. Please.
Bye.
I'll be emailing you.
Okay, email me.
All right, have a good night. Bye, y'all.
Bye.